He was moments away from finalizing a billion-dollar merger when his adoptive daughter whispered the 6 words that would shatter his world. "She's not your fiancée. She's an actress." June Langley sat on the polished bench outside the tall glass doors of Vail Enterprises' executive boardroom, her legs swinging just above the floor. Her sneakers didn't quite touch the shiny tiles, but that didn't bother her. She wasn't thinking about her shoes, or the people rushing past in suits, or even the fancy water machine with the lemon slices floating inside. She was thinking about what she had seen that morning, and she was trying to figure out how to tell Adrian. The hallway was quiet except for the distant sound of voices inside the boardroom, low and serious. Her adoptive father's voice rose now and then, clear and steady, talking about projections and synergy and global integration, words June didn't fully understand but had heard often enough to recognize. He was good at those words, good at making people lean forward and nod and write checks with lots of zeros. Adrian Vail was one of those people who made rooms go silent when he walked in. Tall, sharp, and always dressed like the inside of a very expensive magazine. He didn't smile much, but when he did, it looked like the sun sneaking out from behind a cloud. June had seen that smile maybe 5 times in the 3 months she'd been living with him, and 2 of those times had been because of his fiancée, Camille. June didn't like Camille. Camille was beautiful, with sleek black hair and perfect teeth, and a voice that always sounded like she was about to say something clever. Adults loved her. Waiters gave her free desserts. The lady at the front desk called her the future Mrs. Vail, like it was a compliment carved in gold. But June had seen something that morning that made her stomach feel strange. Not like nervous butterflies, but more like a warning siren. They'd been at the mall, June and the nanny, passing the movie theater on their way to the bookstore. And there, on one of the old posters taped to the side wall, was Camille's face. Only the name under the picture wasn't Camille. It was Lana Ray. And she wasn't wearing a cocktail dress or holding a glass of wine like she always did at the house. She was dressed like a thief, holding a bag of fake jewels and smirking at the camera. The movie was from a few years ago, and the paper had faded around the edges, but it was her. June was sure of it. She had stared at that poster for so long, the nanny had to call her name twice. But she didn't say anything then. She hadn't said anything in the car ride home either, or during lunch. Because who would believe a kid over Camille? Camille, who smiled like a magazine cover and laughed at all of Adrian's jokes and always smelled like expensive flowers. But now June was here, waiting. Because maybe Adrian wouldn't believe her either, but she had to try. The boardroom door opened with a quiet hiss, and people began filing out, talking into phones and adjusting their ties. Adrian followed, expression unreadable, nodding politely as a woman in a navy suit said something about final paperwork. He didn't notice June at first. He was halfway down the hall before she stood and whispered his name. Adrian. He turned, surprised to see her there, and walked back toward her, lowering his voice. June? What are you doing up here? She looked up at him, heart pounding. Her voice came out soft but steady. She's not who she says she is. He frowned. Who? Camille. She's not your fiancée. She's an actress. I saw her at the mall, on a movie poster. Her name's Lana Ray. For a moment, the hallway went completely silent around them. Adrian just stared at her. And June, who had never felt smaller or braver in her life, whispered again. I think she's lying to you. Adrian Vail blinked as he looked down at June, the little girl who had somehow become part of his life 3 months ago. Her dark brown eyes were wide and serious, her chin tilted up just a little, like she was waiting to be scolded or dismissed. She still did that sometimes, bracing herself for disappointment like it was a habit she couldn't shake. He had just walked out of one of the most important meetings of the year, a billion-dollar merger hanging delicately in the air, his mind full of contracts, negotiations, and timelines. But now, all of it slipped to the side as he focused on this one small person standing in front of him. What did you say? He asked, keeping his voice low. June glanced around the hallway, then stepped closer, close enough that he had to lean down to hear her. She didn't look nervous, exactly. More like she knew what she was about to say would matter, and she needed to say it right. "She's not your fiancée," she whispered. "She's an actress. I saw her on a movie poster at the mall. Her name was Lana Ray." Adrian straightened, his expression unreadable. People moved around them, executives, assistants, security, none of them noticing the sudden shift in his world. He looked back at June, who stood still as a statue, not blinking, not fidgeting. "Are you sure?" he asked, more out of habit than doubt. He'd learned long ago that you always asked for confirmation, even when the source sounded certain. June nodded. "Yes." I stared at it for a long time. It was her face, same eyes, same smile, but the name said Lana. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts trying to keep up. Camille? An actress? He shook his head slightly, more at himself than at her. He'd met Camille at a charity gala a year ago. She'd been everything he wasn't. Warm, social, glowing with charm. She had known about his company, had asked thoughtful questions about his work, had seemed genuinely interested in what made him tick, and slowly, carefully, she had become part of his world. She had never mentioned acting. He looked back at June, her small face, serious in a way no child's face should ever have to be. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She wasn't trying to get attention. She was just telling him the truth, or at least what she believed to be true. Adrian crouched, so they were eye level. "Thank you for telling me," he said gently. June shrugged. "I thought you should know, just in case." He nodded and stood up again. "Go wait in my office, okay? I'll meet you there in a few minutes." She walked away without another word, her footsteps light, her ponytail swaying slightly behind her. Adrian watched her go, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened a browser and typed in the name slowly, carefully. Lana Ray. Within seconds, a search result popped up. Old movie listings, a few tabloid photos from years ago, a drama film called Crimson Mirage. And there, in one faded still image, was Camille's face, except it wasn't Camille, it was Lana. Same bone structure, same eyes, same mouth. Her hair was longer, styled differently, but it was her. He stared at the image for a long time, then saved it quietly to his phone. June hadn't lied. And suddenly, nothing in his world felt solid anymore. That evening, Adrian Vale sat in the back seat of his town car, staring out the window as the city rolled by in a blur of lights and motion. The day had been long, packed with meetings and calls and decisions that affected the lives of hundreds. But it wasn't the merger or the numbers on his screen that stayed in his mind. It was June's voice. Soft, steady, too serious for someone her age. "She's not your fiancée. She's an actress. I saw her on a movie poster at the mall." He had smiled politely when she said it, told her thank you, promised to look into it. And then he tried to laugh it off, even chuckled to himself as he poured a drink later in his penthouse. Kids say the strangest things, he told himself. June had been through a lot. Maybe she saw someone who only looked like Camille. Maybe it was her way of adjusting to this new life, trying to test boundaries, to see if he would listen. But still, the image had stayed on his phone, the one he had saved. Lana Ray, arms crossed, looking directly at the camera with a smirk that was unmistakably Camille's. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was exact. The same arch of the eyebrow, the same curve of the lips, the same faint dimple that appeared when she smiled. It didn't make sense. Camille was poised, always composed, the kind of woman who knew what fork to use at any dinner table, who made everyone feel like they belonged. She could talk to venture capitalists one minute and joke with waiters the next. Reporters loved her. His board loved her. Even Josephine, his family's longtime housekeeper, who trusted almost no one, had said Camille seemed too perfect to be real, but with a warm smile that said she meant it as a compliment. And yet, June's words refused to leave him. That voice, so calm, not accusing or dramatic, just stating what she saw. He'd learned over the years to listen when someone spoke like that. Not loud, not angry, but sure. When he got home, Camille was in the kitchen, barefoot and beautiful in a soft blue sweater, stirring something on the stove. She turned when he entered, her face lighting up, like always. "You're late," she said playfully. "I was starting to think I'd have to eat this risotto all by myself." He smiled and kissed her cheek. "Big day. The boardroom was chaos. You know how it is." "I don't, actually," she teased, "but I'm glad it's over. Sit. I'll get the plates." As she moved around the kitchen, graceful and easy, Adrian watched her more closely than usual. Her movements were fluid, natural, not the kind of acting you'd expect from someone playing a role, but still, something tugged at the edge of his thoughts. He thought about how she had never talked much about her past, how she deflected questions about where she'd lived before moving to the city, how she'd said she studied communications, but had no alumni connections, no old photos, no social media history before 3 years ago. He told himself it was just coincidence, a look-alike, a mistake. But he didn't delete the photo on his phone. And when Camille leaned over and smiled at him, setting down his plate with that effortless charm, he found himself smiling back, while something deep inside whispered a question he couldn't unhear. "Who are you, really?" Adrian couldn't sleep. The city skyline outside his bedroom window sparkled against the dark, the quiet hum of life in motion, but his thoughts refused to settle. Camille lay beside him, sound asleep, her breathing soft and even. Her face, perfectly still in the low light, looked peaceful, untouched by the worries that spun in his head. He slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her, and padded barefoot to the living room. The apartment was silent, still filled with the scent of the lavender candle she always lit before bed. He sat on the couch, pulled out his laptop, and opened a search engine. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before typing, "Camille Hart biography." Dozens of links appeared. Glossy magazine features, charity event appearances, articles from lifestyle blogs that described her as a rising star in philanthropic circles, and the stunning fiancée of tech mogul Adrian Vale. But they all said the same things. She was elegant, private, involved in arts education, and supportive of Adrian's growing empire. None of them reached beyond the last 3 years. There were no high school photos, no old college posts, no grainy pictures from someone's dorm party. It was as if Camille had stepped into existence fully formed, already polished and perfect. That alone might not have meant anything. Some people kept their digital lives clean on purpose. But after June's whisper, everything seemed different. He closed the tabs and opened a new search window. He thought about what June had said at the mall. A poster. A name. Not Camille. Lana. He typed slowly, carefully. Lana Ray movie poster. The screen loaded, then paused. The images that appeared weren't new. They were dated, like they came from the edges of the internet. A few looked like festival ads, some were screenshots from low-budget trailers, and in the middle of the page was a thumbnail for a movie called Crimson Mirage. He clicked on it. The poster loaded. A smoky background, a woman in a red dress, her lips slightly parted, her eyes sharp, mysterious. She held a silver gun in one hand and a stolen necklace in the other. The title was bold across the top, but Adrian barely noticed it. All he could see was her face. It was Camille, or it was someone who looked exactly like her. He sat back, staring, waiting for his brain to tell him it was just a coincidence. Maybe she had a twin she never mentioned. Maybe he was imagining the similarity. But when he looked again, it was still her. Not just similar, identical. The same cheekbones, the same curve to her mouth. Even the same little scar near her hairline, the one she always covered with makeup. He scrolled down. The actress's name was listed as Lana Ray. No recent credits, no interviews. Nothing beyond a handful of indie films and a few obscure shorts that no one had heard of. Then she vanished, like someone had wiped her trail clean. Adrian rubbed his face with both hands. He could feel his pulse picking up, his mind chasing thoughts in too many directions. Why hadn't she told him? Why had she hidden something like this? He clicked through more images, more movie stills, and in every one, Lana Ray looked more and more like the woman sleeping in his bed, the woman he was supposed to marry. A cold knot formed in his stomach. She hadn't just changed her name. She had rewritten her entire identity. Adrian stared at the laptop screen. The soft glow, the only light in the room. The clock on the wall ticked past 2 in the morning, but he didn't feel tired. He felt wired, tense, like every click of his mouse peeled away a layer of something too perfect to be real. He had started with curiosity, maybe even doubt, but now he was following something deeper. Not suspicion, not yet. Just a growing sense that he didn't know the woman he had asked to marry him. He tried again, typing Camille Hart's name into a public records search. He used her birthday, her hometown, the details she'd shared casually over dinner one night, just enough to sound real. The site returned nothing. No school transcripts, no yearbook entries, no voter registration until 4 years ago. Even her social security trail only picked up in the last 5 years, with no sign of medical history, college loans, or even a driver's license from before that. It was like she'd appeared out of nowhere. He leaned back, his thoughts racing. People rebranded themselves all the time, especially in high society, but this was different. This wasn't a fresh start. This was a clean slate, engineered with the precision of someone who didn't want to be found. He opened Camille's official bio on a charity website, the one she'd sent him herself when she agreed to co-chair the literacy gala with him. It described her as passionate about the arts, educated in London, dedicated to underprivileged youth. But there were no specifics, no names of schools, no references to where she grew up or how she got involved in philanthropy. It was all polished phrases and elegant fluff. He clicked through photos, red carpet events, press releases, magazine shoots. She was always glowing, always standing just beside him with her hand on his arm, like she belonged there. But the timeline was clear. Everything started after they met. There were no photos of her attending events before that night at the gala, no pictures of her with friends, no old tagged Instagram posts or awkward high school selfies. Just page after page of a woman stepping into the spotlight as if it had always belonged to her. He opened her LinkedIn profile. It listed a consulting firm he'd never heard of, vague job descriptions, and glowing recommendations from names that didn't link anywhere. He clicked one. William Thorne, strategic director, and the profile didn't exist. None of them did. It wasn't just a gap in her past. It was a carefully constructed narrative, built like a resume for a role she'd been auditioning for. He glanced at his phone on the table. Camille had texted him earlier from the bedroom. "Can't sleep without you. Come to bed soon." She was still there, in his home, in his life, sleeping peacefully while he tried to trace the person behind the name. He told himself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she had changed her name for personal reasons. Maybe she had overcome something painful and didn't want to talk about it. But if that were true, wouldn't she have told him? Wouldn't someone planning to marry him want to be known, not just admired? Adrian closed the laptop slowly, but the question stayed open in his mind. Who was Camille Hart? And what else had she hidden behind that perfect smile? Adrian sat at the breakfast table the next morning, his mind still foggy from the late-night research that had led him nowhere and everywhere at once. Camille was already gone, claiming an early meeting with a caterer for the upcoming gala. She had kissed his cheek on her way out, smiling, warm as ever, like nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. He just didn't know what exactly yet. June appeared in the kitchen doorway a few minutes later, still in her pajamas, clutching something close to her chest. Her curls were messy, and she rubbed her eyes as she padded barefoot across the floor. Adrian watched her with a quiet curiosity. There was something different in her face today. Not scared, not angry, just serious. She climbed into the chair across from him and placed the object on the table. A red spiral-bound notebook with slightly bent corners and faded stickers peeling off the cover. He'd seen it before, usually on the couch or the floor beside her bed. He had assumed it was full of doodles or secret code, the kind of quiet pastime a quiet child kept to herself. "I want to show you something," she said softly, her voice small but steady. Adrian leaned forward. "What is it?" June opened the notebook to a page in the middle, revealing a messy drawing of the living room. Stick figures stood by the windows, and little arrows pointed to various items in the room. But it wasn't just a drawing, it was a map. Each page that followed showed different parts of the house: the kitchen, the staircase, his office, with notes written in shaky handwriting beside each sketch. "Is this what you've been working on?" he asked gently. June nodded. "I started after the first time I saw her sneaking around at night." Adrian's fingers stilled on the edge of the table. "Camille?" "She always goes into your office when you're sleeping," June said, flipping to another page that showed a crude clock with 2 stick hands. "Usually after midnight. She carries her phone and a little light. I watched her from the stairs. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I tried," June said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you're busy, and she's always around, and I didn't want to sound like I was making things up." She turned another page, and there it was. A child's drawing of Camille standing by Adrian's desk, phone in one hand, the other reaching into a drawer. Another page showed Camille typing with a note. "She looks at his computer. I think she takes pictures." Adrian felt his chest tighten. The images were simple, childish even, but the details were disturbingly accurate. He knew the layout of his own office, the drawers Camille had no reason to open, the time she said she had gone to bed early. "She uses speakerphones sometimes," June added. "She talks quietly in another language. I couldn't understand it, but she says your name a lot, and something about a project." He looked at her, this 9-year-old girl who barely spoke above a whisper most days, who had drawn a surveillance journal in crayon and pencil, trying to make sense of something no child should ever have to notice. "You believe me now?" June asked. Adrian didn't speak for a moment. Then he reached across the table and gently closed the notebook. "I believe you," he said, and for the first time June smiled. Not because she was happy, but because someone had finally listened. The restaurant was one of Camille's favorites, a quiet rooftop place with warm lighting and a view that made the whole city look like it was holding its breath. They sat at a table near the edge, the soft murmur of other diners blending with the clink of silverware and distant music. Camille wore a navy dress that shimmered in the candlelight, her hair pinned up just the way she knew Adrian liked it. She smiled across the table, pouring him a glass of wine with practiced ease. "You've been quiet today," she said, her voice smooth and playful. "Everything okay at work?" "Long day," Adrian said with a small smile. "Lots on my mind." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand, her touch light, her nails perfectly manicured. "I know that face. You're thinking too much again. You need to let go once in a while." He smiled back, but it didn't reach his eyes. All day, he had been going over June's notebook, over the names and faces Camille had dropped into conversations like breadcrumbs. He had chosen one carefully, not at random, but one Camille had mentioned at least twice, her college friend, Tara Linfield. Tara, who supposedly helped her through a tough breakup, who had taught her how to cook Thai food during their senior year, who Camille said was like a sister. "You know who I was thinking about today?" Adrian said casually, watching her carefully. "Tara Linfield. You haven't mentioned her in a while." Camille froze just a second too long. Her smile flickered. Her eyes blinked twice, fast, like her mind had to catch up. "Tara," she said slowly, as if tasting the name for the first time. "Wow, that's a blast from the past. I haven't talked to her in forever." "She went to school with you in London, right?" he asked, his tone light, nonchalant. Camille nodded. "Yes, we were inseparable for a while. But she moved to Australia, I think? Maybe New Zealand? Somewhere far. Time zones make it hard to keep in touch." She laughed then, but it sounded thin. Adrian didn't press. He sipped his wine and nodded like her story made sense, like he hadn't already searched every alumni database of the London university she claimed to attend. There was no record of Camille Hart. No Tara Linfield either. Nothing. I remember you said she taught you how to make that green curry, he added. Camille hesitated again. Did I? Oh, maybe. Or maybe it was her roommate. They were both amazing cooks. I just remember a lot of late-night meals and laughing about nothing. Adrian kept smiling, but his thoughts spun faster. Her story was changing mid-sentence. She couldn't remember details she told him months ago. And worse, she didn't seem bothered by the fact that she was making it up as she went. The waitress arrived with their food, and Camille jumped at the interruption, thanking her with too much enthusiasm. Adrian studied her then, not the way he used to, with admiration and attraction, but with careful distance. She was still beautiful, still charming, but now he saw the cracks forming under the surface, hairline fractures in the story she had built around him. She picked up her fork and started eating, relaxed again, like nothing had happened. Adrian didn't say another word about Tara Linfield. He didn't need to. He'd seen enough. Camille wasn't just hiding something. She was pretending to be someone who had never really existed. Adrian sat alone in his office long after the rest of the building had gone quiet. The city lights blinked beyond the glass wall behind him, stretching far into the distance, but he didn't look up. His focus was locked on the screen in front of him, where lines of code and phone logs ran like a slow river of buried secrets. He'd pulled Camille's number from his phone, run it through every system his cybersecurity team had once built for client tracking. It wasn't something he did lightly, but this wasn't about paranoia anymore. It was about truth. Camille's number didn't come back as clean as he expected. Instead, it had a flag. A soft ping buried under a layer of redirection, masked by burner call records and rerouted data trails. It took him nearly an hour to dig through the maze, but eventually it led to a man named Victor Drexler, a name Adrian hadn't heard in years. Victor used to work in media security, mostly for film studios, managing leaks and protecting star reputations. But people in Adrian's circles knew him for something else. He was the guy you called when you wanted something erased. A scandal, a person, a past. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his stomach tight. He remembered Victor from a job years ago, one where a high-level breach had almost taken down a client's product launch. Victor had been brought in by the legal team to clean things up. Adrian had never liked him. Too slick, too good at making problems disappear. He hesitated only a moment before calling in a favor. Lucas, Adrian said once, his old security lead picked up. I need a trace. Quiet, fast. I'm sending you a number. The link goes to Victor Drexler. I want to know if he's had contact with anyone using the name Camille Hart or Lana Ray. Lucas didn't ask questions. He never did. Give me 10 minutes, he replied. Adrian waited. He watched the minutes tick by, his hand drumming lightly against the desk. Camille's face flashed in his mind. The way she had laughed over dinner, the way she leaned into him with that perfect blend of affection and admiration. A woman like that didn't just fall into your life. Not unless she was placed there. Lucas called back in 7 minutes. He took a call from her number 4 months ago, Lucas said. A short one. 16 seconds. Then again, 3 weeks later. After that, nothing. Where is he now? That's the weird part, Lucas said. His listed apartment is empty. Phone's been off for 2 days. And get this, his office in LA was cleared out this morning, completely wiped. Not even a paperclip left behind. Adrian felt the chill settle deep in his chest. He knew I was getting close. Looks like it. Someone must have tipped him off. Or he was already watching the trail. Adrian ended the call and sat still for a long moment. This wasn't just about Camille anymore. It was about whoever had helped her disappear from one life and reappear in his. Victor had done this before. Built identities. Removed evidence. If Camille had been one of his projects, she was likely trained for exactly the role she'd been playing. The sweet girl at the gala. The charming fiancée. The woman who remembered the names of his board members and brewed his favorite coffee exactly how he liked it. It hadn't been coincidence. It had been choreography. Adrian stood and walked to the window, staring down at the city below. Camille was still asleep in his home, still part of his life, and yet everything about her was beginning to unravel. And now the man who might have had the answers was gone. Too fast to be a coincidence. Too clean to be an accident. June waited until everyone was asleep. The house was dark and quiet. The kind of quiet that made every creak in the floor feel louder than it should. She moved slowly, the small camera clutched in her hand, the one Adrian had given her weeks ago to take pictures of her drawings. What he didn't know was that she'd figured out how to turn on its motion sensor. She had read about it in a tech magazine left on the kitchen counter, and when she realized Camille might be sneaking around again, she knew she had to do something. She tiptoed down the hall and pushed open the door to Adrian's office. The room smelled like books and leather, and the faint blue light from the computer screen glowed softly in the dark. June moved quickly but carefully, climbing onto the big chair behind the desk and taping the camera to the underside of a bookshelf that looked directly at the desk. She checked the angle twice, then slipped back out, her heart pounding the entire time. The next morning, she said nothing. She ate her breakfast quietly, watching Camille talk to Adrian about a garden party she wanted to host. June noticed the way Camille's smile didn't reach her eyes. She noticed how she always stood between Adrian and the doorway, like she was guarding something. But Adrian didn't see it. Not yet. That night, June retrieved the camera. She waited until Adrian was reading in the library, and Camille was taking a bath in the master bathroom. She curled up on her bed with the tablet, connected it to the camera, and opened the footage. At first, nothing. Just a still office, untouched. Then movement. The timestamp read 1:26 a.m. Camille entered the room slowly, barefoot, wearing one of Adrian's shirts and her long hair loose down her back. She didn't turn on the light. She moved directly to the desk, pulling open the top drawer where Adrian kept sensitive documents. She pulled out a folder, flipped through it, then pulled out her phone and took pictures, one by one, quick and practiced, as if she'd done it before. Then she moved to the laptop. June's heart hammered as she watched Camille pull a small device from her pocket and plug it into the side port, a flash drive. Camille typed something, waited, then checked her phone again. After 2 minutes, she unplugged it, erased the computer's search history, and returned everything exactly as she'd found it. She didn't linger. She didn't look nervous. She moved with the calm confidence of someone who had done this many times and didn't expect to get caught. June sat there frozen, the tablet warm in her hands, her mind trying to catch up with what she had just seen. It wasn't just sneaking or spying. Camille was stealing. From Adrian. From their home. And she had done it like she was brushing her teeth, like it was normal. June climbed off the bed, tablet in hand, and walked down the hall to Adrian's library. She found him still reading, his glasses slipping down his nose. He looked up when she entered. "I need to show you something," she said. And when she did, Adrian Vale finally saw the truth with his own eyes. Camille wasn't just a liar. She was an infiltrator. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the footage began again. The timestamp glowed in the corner of the screen as Camille stepped into Adrian's office, her movements calm and deliberate. She didn't hesitate. She didn't pause to look around. She walked straight to the panel near the door and tapped a few numbers into the keypad, disabling the motion sensors with a practiced hand. Not a second of doubt on her face. Adrian watched the video in silence, June beside him on the couch, her legs curled under her and her eyes glued to the screen. It was hard to breathe, harder still to watch. Camille moved through the office like it belonged to her. She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a small USB stick, sleek and black. She plugged it into Adrian's laptop, the one he used only for high-level operations, the same one that held the merger documents he'd been finalizing for the last 6 months. The room was still. The screen reflected on her face, the faint blue glow turning her features cold and unfamiliar. She clicked through folders like she knew exactly where to look. She didn't browse or hesitate. She navigated with confidence, as if someone had walked her through the path before. After selecting what she needed, she copied the files to the USB, then opened another window and ran a script. One Adrian didn't recognize at first, until he looked closer. It wiped traces of her activity, erased the timestamps, overwrote logs. He felt the anger rise in his chest like a wave, not loud or explosive, but slow and bitter, the kind of anger that sat in your bones. She knew what she was doing. She wasn't guessing or snooping. She was trained. Camille removed the USB, tucked it back into her pocket, and carefully pushed the chair back into place. She scanned the room once more, pressed a code into the keypad to reactivate the security system, and left as quietly as she had come. The screen went black. Adrian sat there, staring at the blank screen, the silence pressing in around him. June finally spoke. "She's done it before," she said quietly. "She knows what to do." Adrian nodded, still watching the reflection of the paused video in the dark glass of the window. "She's not who she says she is," he murmured. The next morning, Camille made scrambled eggs and toast. She wore one of his shirts again, laughing softly as she spilled orange juice and reached for a napkin. She kissed his cheek, then his lips, her eyes sparkling, her hand brushing through his hair like she'd done it 100 times. He kissed her back. But this time, his eyes stayed open. She moved around the kitchen like everything was normal, like she hadn't stolen from him in the middle of the night, like she wasn't working some plan he hadn't been invited to understand. And for a moment, Adrian almost believed the act. The easy charm, the soft kiss, the warmth. Almost, he smiled at her over the coffee cup, and she smiled back, completely unaware that the mask was beginning to crack, completely unaware that he had finally stopped being blind. He now knew who was sitting across from him. A stranger. Adrian sat at the far end of a quiet conference room, the kind reserved for conversations that never made it into official reports. The windows were tinted, the lights dim, and the door locked behind him with a soft click. Across the table sat Mara Linton, his longtime friend and legal counsel, the one person he trusted when things went sideways. She wore her usual black suit and practical shoes, her hair pulled back, and a tablet in front of her that she hadn't touched yet. He didn't waste time. He opened his laptop, turned the screen toward her, and hit play. She watched without interrupting. Her face gave nothing away as Camille appeared on screen, moving like a shadow through his office. When it ended, she leaned back slowly and exhaled through her nose, a sound that wasn't quite a sigh, but close. "Well," Mara said, folding her arms, "that's not something I expected to see over my morning coffee." Adrian didn't respond. He just waited. Mara leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "She's good. Calm. Knows your alarm codes. That USB looked custom, by the way. Not something you pick up at a convenience store." "She's not Camille Hart," Adrian said quietly. "Her real name is Lana Ray. Former actress. Disappeared from the film industry a few years ago. Reinvented herself. Built a profile just polished enough to pass. And landed you." He nodded once. "Who else knows?" she asked. "Just you and June." Mara raised her eyebrows. "June knows?" "She found it. She set up the camera. She's the reason I even started looking deeper." Mara shook her head in disbelief. "That girl's sharper than half your security team." "She's careful," Adrian said. "And smart. She's the one who warned me Camille was lying." Mara rubbed her temple with one hand, then looked at him. "So, what's your plan? Are you going to confront Camille? Fire her? Call the police?" "I don't know yet," Adrian admitted, "but I needed you to see it first." Mara tapped her fingers on the table. "This isn't just personal, Adrian. If she's been accessing merger documents, if she's copying proprietary files, this is corporate espionage. If this leaks before we're ready, it won't just hurt you. It could sink the merger. The board would panic. Investors would bail. I'm aware. Then you need to be very careful. Don't tip her off, not yet. We need to find out who she's working with, what exactly she's taken, and how far this goes. And we need evidence. Real, solid, courtroom-grade evidence." Adrian looked down at the paused image of Camille frozen on the screen, her eyes focused on his laptop as she copied the files. "She's been lying to me for months," he said quietly, "and I let her. Mara's voice softened. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. She's in my house, sleeping in my bed. She kisses me in the morning and steals from me at night. Then let's take that pain and turn it into strategy, Mara said. We stay quiet. We gather everything. And when the time is right, we don't just expose her, we end whoever sent her. Adrian closed the laptop, the image of Camille disappearing into darkness. He looked up at Mara, his jaw tight. Let's do it right. June sat cross-legged on the rug in her room, the tablet balanced on her lap. She had found it that morning tucked under the couch cushions in the guest lounge, the one Camille used sometimes when she took private calls. It was sleek and older than Camille's usual devices, the case worn and scuffed, like something that had been passed over or forgotten. Camille had looked flustered when she realized it was missing, her voice a little too high when she asked if anyone had seen her old reading tablet. But June had said nothing. Now the screen glowed in the dim light, and June's fingers moved carefully across the menus. No password, no biometrics, just a swipe and access. She scrolled through photos at first, flowers, event dresses, pictures of wine glasses and hotel rooms. But then she saw it, a folder buried deep in the files with a strange name that didn't match the rest. Audition notes. She tapped it open. Inside were documents, all with titles like Phase 1, Dialogue, and Target Script A. Some were labeled with dates, others with what looked like scene numbers. The scripts weren't movie lines or monologues. They were conversations. Conversations Camille had repeated to Adrian over the last year. First date. Mention father's business collapse. Show vulnerability. By third month, introduce shared love of old literature. Favor Dostoevsky. Touch his arm when discussing goals. Tilt head when he talks about loss. Each file was a step-by-step guide. Instructions on how to become someone Adrian would love. Someone who seemed real. Someone who mirrored his values, his pain, his ambition. June's stomach twisted, but she kept reading. One document titled Emergency Emotion Responses listed lines to say if caught, if confronted, if asked about inconsistencies. I was scared you wouldn't like the real me. I didn't think I mattered enough for you to care about my past. I've never felt this safe with anyone before. Each response came with notes on facial expressions, which emotions to mimic, when to cry, when to hold his hand and beg for forgiveness. June didn't want to look at the videos, but her curiosity wouldn't let her stop. She tapped one of the clips. Camille appeared on screen, standing in a room with bare walls and a single light above her. She was younger, her hair a little different, but her voice the same. She looked into the camera and began reciting a speech about falling in love, about losing someone close, and learning to trust again. Halfway through, she stopped, shook her head, and repeated the lines, this time with tears in her eyes. She was rehearsing heartbreak like it was theater, and she was good at it. June watched 3 more clips, each one more detailed than the last. Each one a version of Camille, learning how to fake sincerity, how to steal someone's heart like a role she'd auditioned for and won. She closed the tablet slowly, then slid it under her bed. Her chest felt heavy, her throat tight, but her mind was clear. It had never been love. It had always been a performance. Adrian stood in the center of his study, phone pressed tightly to his ear, the curtains drawn to keep out the morning sun. On the other end of the line was Lucas, his most trusted investigator, the same one who had helped him trace Victor Drexler. Lucas didn't speak until he was sure the call was secure. When he did, his voice was low, deliberate, and full of things Adrian already feared were true. Camille Hart doesn't exist, Lucas said. Her real name is Lana Ray, born in Chicago. Moved to Los Angeles at 21 to chase an acting career. Had a few roles in indie films, mostly small-time stuff. Used her looks, her voice, her charm. She was on track to land something bigger until it all collapsed. Adrian swallowed hard. What happened? Scandal, Lucas said. She got caught in a scheme involving a casting director. Nothing illegal on her part. Not officially, but messy enough that her name was quietly blacklisted. Not enough for headlines. Just enough that doors stopped opening. Adrian walked slowly to the fireplace and leaned against the mantel. His reflection in the dark TV screen showed a man who was trying not to fall apart. A man who had once believed he was engaged to someone genuine. She disappeared for about a year after that, Lucas continued. No digital trace, no credits. Then she shows up under a new alias. First as a wellness coach, then as a private arts consultant. Always just close enough to money to be useful, never close enough to be questioned. And now? Adrian asked, though he already knew. She's been doing something called social engineering jobs, Lucas said. It's basically long cons for corporate targets. She studies the mark, learns their habits, builds a persona to match. Then she gets close, earns trust, and extracts information. Sometimes she disappears when the job's done. Sometimes the damage is deeper. Adrian let out a breath through his nose. He had known for days that something wasn't right, but hearing it said out loud felt different. Lana Ray wasn't just a woman with a complicated past. She was a professional manipulator, trained in charm, fluent in deception, and she had chosen him as her latest role. Who's she working for? He asked. We're still tracing that, Lucas said. But there's chatter about a firm that contracts out these kinds of specialists. It's private, hard to pin down, think more espionage than employment. Adrian nodded slowly. Keep digging. After the call ended, he didn't move. He stood there in the stillness of the room, trying to make sense of the woman he had welcomed into his home, into his heart. He thought about every laugh they had shared, every quiet night, every whispered, I love you. All of it built on a script. He walked to the bookshelf and pulled out the photo of them at a charity gala, the first event they had attended together. He studied her face, the perfect smile, the way she leaned into him like she belonged there. She had been acting even then. And he, for all his brilliance in business and security, hadn't seen it coming. Adrian sat at the large oak table in the private conference room, Mara on one side, June perched quietly beside him on a chair too big for her small frame. The weight of recent discoveries pressed down on all of them, but there was no room for panic. Instead, there was focus, a hard, steady resolve to take back control. Mara laid out the plan with calm precision, her voice steady but firm. We let Camille think she's winning. We don't confront her yet. If she senses she's being watched or doubted, she'll disappear. That means we lose any chance to catch who she's working for. Adrian nodded, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. So we create the illusion of normalcy. Continue with business as usual. But we limit access to the most sensitive data, funneling only what we want her to see. June, who had been listening intently, looked up. Can I help? Mara smiled gently. You already have, June. Your eyes caught things no one else saw, and your camera gave us the proof. June's face lit up with a quiet pride, but her eyes held seriousness beyond her years. If she tries to take more, we catch her. Adrian appreciated the girl's bravery. In many ways, she was the smartest person in the room. Mara continued, We'll set up a decoy project file. It looks like the real thing, full of details that would be valuable to our competitors. But it's actually a trap. Any attempt to access or transfer that data will alert us immediately. He looked at June. You helped with the camera. Can you work with Lucas to set up monitoring on that file? June nodded without hesitation. I can do that. Adrian leaned back, feeling the tight knot of anxiety ease slightly. This was no longer about being a victim. It was about strategy, about turning the tables. We'll watch and wait, Mara said. Camille will try to make a move when she thinks the timing is right. That's when we step in. Adrian thought about Camille's smile, the way she had acted so effortlessly, as if she owned every room she entered. But now, she was the one being played. Let her finish the scene, Adrian said quietly, the edge in his voice unmistakable. Then we reveal the truth, Mara agreed, and make sure she has nowhere left to run. June glanced between the two adults. I'm ready. The three of them shared a brief moment of understanding. They were no longer just a broken family trying to piece itself back together. They were a team, a force, and they were about to take back what was theirs. The boardroom was filled with the usual hum of quiet conversations, the rustle of papers, and the occasional tap of keyboards. The long mahogany table gleamed under the soft overhead lights, surrounded by the city's most powerful executives, all here to discuss the future of Vale Enterprises. Adrian sat near the head of the table, eyes sharp, watching everyone carefully. But his attention kept drifting to Camille, who sat beside him, flawless, as always, in a tailored black suit, her smile polished and practiced. Camille moved with grace, chatting quietly with the other board members, nodding and laughing at just the right moments. No one suspected the carefully constructed web she had woven over months. No one but Adrian and Mara, and of course June, who was not there, but had helped set up the security that surrounded them now. Unbeknownst to Camille, the entire room was wired with hidden microphones and cameras, all feeding live footage to a secure server where Lucas and Josephine monitored every move. The briefcase Adrian had brought with him was fitted with tracking devices, tampered by Josephine to send immediate alerts if tampered with. Camille had a plan. As the meeting drew to a close, she reached under the table and slid her hand toward Adrian's briefcase. Her fingers were steady, but her eyes flicked around nervously. She pulled out a tiny device, a bugging tool no bigger than a USB stick, and carefully attached it inside the briefcase. Every move was deliberate, quick, and yet precise. She knew exactly what she was doing. What Camille didn't realize was that as she planted the device, the room's security system silently recorded everything. The moment her hand slipped inside the briefcase, a discreet alarm pinged in the monitoring room. Lucas's eyes sharpened on the screen. She's planting a bug, he whispered into his headset. Get ready. Back in the boardroom, Camille slipped the bugging device into a hidden pocket and pushed the briefcase under the table. She leaned back, composing herself as if nothing had happened. The meeting wrapped up moments later, with final handshakes and polite smiles. Adrian's heart pounded beneath his calm exterior. He met Camille's gaze briefly. Her eyes shimmered with a mix of confidence and nervousness. She thought she had won, but the real game was just beginning. As the guests filed out, Mara quietly moved to Adrian's side. She didn't expect the room to be wired, she murmured. We have all the evidence we need. Adrian nodded, feeling the rush of relief and determination. Camille's betrayal was clear, documented, and undeniable. Outside the room, June waited, her small frame barely noticeable in the sea of suits. She clutched a tablet, ready to assist if needed. The little girl who had once been ignored was now the linchpin in their fight to reclaim trust. In the coming days, they would use this moment, the moment Camille tried to spy on them, to expose her true nature to the world. And Adrian vowed silently that no one would ever fool him again. The room was dim, the only light coming from the glow of multiple screens displaying live feeds from hidden cameras and intercepted communications. Adrian stood beside Mara, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a stone. They had waited patiently, watching Camille move through the motions, unaware that every step she took was being recorded, every word spoken was being captured. At exactly the right moment, Lucas gave the signal. Camille was in Adrian's office again, laptop open, fingers flying over the keyboard as she transmitted files to an encrypted server. The air was thick with tension as Mara and Adrian stepped out of their hiding place and into the room, catching her off guard. She didn't panic. Her face remained composed, almost serene, as if this was just another scene in a play she had rehearsed 1,000 times before. Mara held up a tablet, the footage playing on loop. The camera showed Camille slipping into the office at night, disabling alarms, and copying files with precision. The evidence was undeniable. Camille's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Mara. For a moment, there was silence. Then she spoke, voice steady but cold. It was just a role, she said. A performance crafted for the right audience. You believed it because I made you believe. Adrian felt a chill run down his spine. The woman he had loved, trusted, and planned a future with was admitting it had all been an act. I wasn't here to hurt you, Camille continued. Not personally. This was a job I took to survive. Everyone plays a part in this world. Mine was just more honest than most. Her eyes hardened, and the warmth that had once captivated Adrian was gone, replaced by a calculating glint that made her almost unrecognizable. Why? Adrian asked, voice barely above a whisper. Why? Me? Camille's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile. Because you were the perfect target. Wealth, influence, secrets worth millions. And I was good at what I do. Mara, step forward. And who hired you? Who's behind this? Camille shrugged. That's not my story to tell. I'm just the actor. Adrian's fists clenched. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, to break through the wall she had built around herself. But he knew it wouldn't help. She was gone, replaced by this stranger who saw life as a stage and people as props. As federal agents arrived to take Camille into custody, Adrian stood silently, the truth settling like ash in his heart. The woman he thought he knew had been a mask, and beneath it lay only deception. June watched from the doorway, her small hand gripping Josephine's tightly. She had helped uncover the truth, but the victory felt hollow. In the stillness that followed, Adrian vowed to rebuild, not just his company, but the trust he had lost. And this time, he would trust only those who earned it, not those who played a part. The curtain had fallen, the play was over, and reality, harsh and unyielding, had taken its place. The house was quiet now, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm has passed, and the sun starts to peek through heavy clouds. Adrian sat on the edge of the sofa, but his mind wasn't on the plush cushions or the warm glow of the lamps. His thoughts were somewhere else, on the small figure standing nervously near the window. June looked up as he called her name softly, her eyes so full of the weight of what she had seen and said, met his. For a moment she hesitated, unsure if she belonged in this space, in this family, in this moment. Adrian reached out, his hands steady and gentle, and knelt down so they were eye to eye. The difference in their heights made him feel both powerful and humbled all at once. He wanted her to know that she mattered, that her voice had been heard when so many others had ignored it. You were the only one, he said quietly, the only one who saw her clearly from the start. You didn't just see the surface. You saw what was hidden. June's lips pressed together, a shy smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. It wasn't the smile of a child carefree and light. It was the smile of someone who had survived too much, but was learning finally what it meant to be safe. I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner, Adrian continued. I was blind because I wanted to believe the best. But you trusted your instincts. You trusted yourself. She nodded slowly, her small hand reaching up to touch his. The warmth of their connection was real, not forced or scripted like so much else had been in recent months. I won't ignore your whispers again, he promised. You're part of this family now, June. Not just because of papers or courtrooms, but because you belong here, because you're important. June's eyes shone with something new, hope. The heavy shadows that had lived there before began to lift, replaced by a light that felt like acceptance, like home. For the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled fully, the kind of smile that filled the room and softened the edges of broken things. It was a smile that said she had finally found a place where she was seen, where she was safe. Adrian held her hand a little tighter, feeling a swell of gratitude that this small girl had been the light in his darkest hours. She had been his warning, his courage, his truth. Together they sat in the quiet room, not needing words, just the comfort of presence. And in that moment, the fractures left by betrayal began to heal. Not because the past had been forgotten, but because the future was being built, one honest step at a time. Weeks had passed since the storm had broken over Adrian's world. The company that had once teetered on the edge of disaster was now steady, fortified by new security measures and the unwavering determination of the people who refused to let it fall. Camille was facing charges that would keep her accountable for the damage she had caused, her carefully constructed lies unraveling in court. The media had lost interest in the scandal, turning their attention elsewhere, while Adrian focused on rebuilding what had been broken, not just the business, but the trust within his home. June's room was a reflection of that new beginning. Walls once bare were now lined with posters of circuitry, security protocols, and inspirational quotes about courage and resilience. Blueprints for inventions she dreamed of creating were pinned carefully above her desk, alongside photos of computers and gadgets she'd been tinkering with since the day she arrived. A small shelf held tech kits, wires, and components, each labeled with her neat handwriting. It was her sanctuary, a place where she could be herself, where curiosity and knowledge grew without fear. One bright morning, Adrian stood backstage at June's school auditorium, his heart full and his mind sharp. Today was the day he would introduce her to a crowd that didn't yet know the story behind the quiet girl with the observant eyes. Parents, teachers, and students filled the seats, chatting softly as the event was about to begin. The principal gave a brief introduction, welcoming Adrian Vale, the man who had risen from humble beginnings to build a tech empire. When Adrian stepped onto the stage, the room fell into respectful silence. He scanned the crowd, then looked down at June standing beside him, her small hand slipping into his. "Today," he began, voice steady and warm, "I have the honor of introducing someone very special, not just to this school, but to my life. This is my daughter." A ripple of surprised applause spread through the audience. June's cheeks flushed pink, but she stood tall, eyes bright and unwavering. "She's not only the smartest person I know," Adrian continued, "but she's also the best security analyst in the building. She helped protect this company from threats no one else could see. She taught me that strength isn't just in power or money, but in paying attention to the smallest details and trusting those who speak up." June glanced up at him and smiled, that genuine smile that had become more frequent in recent weeks, the one that told the world she belonged. As he spoke, Adrian felt a swell of pride that had nothing to do with business success or public recognition. It was pride in family, the family they had chosen and built together through trials and trust. After the event, parents and teachers approached June with words of admiration and curiosity, asking about her interests, her projects, and her future plans. Adrian watched as she answered with confidence, the shy girl he had met months ago blossoming into a young woman ready to face the world. Back at home, the house felt different. The air was lighter, filled with laughter and plans, instead of secrets and suspicion. Josephine had returned to her quiet role, keeping the household running smoothly, while Adrian and June worked together on new ideas and inventions. They had been tested, challenged, and changed by everything they'd been through. But in the end, what mattered most was this: a family that couldn't be faked, built not on appearances or convenience, but on honesty, courage, and the choice to stand together. And as the sun set behind the city's skyline, Adrian looked out his window, thinking about the journey they had taken. He knew the road ahead would have its challenges, but with June by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. Because some families aren't just born, they're made. If this story moved you, like it moved us, don't forget to give it a like. And if you want more powerful stories like this one, hit subscribe. We'd love to have you with us.